We will now begin the last session for the day, Retracing Maps in Search of Language, an illustrated lecture by Nilima Sheikh. Nilima Sheikh studied history at Delhi University and then art at Baroda, where she was introduced to the linguistics of varied art-making processes. During the last 2 decades, she's worked on subjects that relate to the northern region of the subcontinent of India and Pakistan, particularly to Kashmir. This has accumulated in a body of work that tries creating visual language to bring together different aspects of the region and its histories to understand some of the complexities therein. She has written on art in books, journals, and catalog essays for friends and illustrated books for children. Please welcome Nilima Sheikh, Retracing Maps in Search of Language, an illustrated lecture.
I'm quite delighted to be here. Many, many thanks for the organizers for giving me this wonderful opportunity. Imaging the circumstances of human pain, whether personal or of others, has always been part of the artist's job. And every artist has to devise their own language to do so. We have now the good fortune of having access to the means and devices of art practice across the boundaries of history and geography. The privilege of painting now is not only in the number of choices available, but also in not having to choose to exclude. I have looked at the histories of painting in Asia and Europe to cobble up a language for myself to extend modernist frames and learn to talk of things that concern me. The additive for me has become a means of including and extending and to pitch myself into plural modes of address with which to inhabit and renew stereotype. For this, I have also depended on song, text, and poetry. I believe that the use of these does not impinge on the autonomy of the painted image. In fact, I could argue that autonomy itself is expendable if it does not extend meaning. Inspired by the form of the illuminated manuscript, I have, as far back as the early 1980s, interspersed verses in Gujarati in a set of 12 serialized paintings I made to render the life of a girl lost to what came to be known as bright burning. However, it was with the publication of Urvashi Bhutalia's The Other Side of Silence, Voices from the Partition of India, in 1998, which opened my eyes to the impact of the choices made on women. Though I found that there were other forms that could extend the meaning of my work. I mean, this was the first time I was actually using discursive text to work it into my work. The issue became for me the logistics of translating discursive text into a visual language. I knew I could only notate some of these by attempting to inscribe them with stains of other kinds of history, of painting and lore, while contextualizing them with excerpts of the text. I felt the need to take up Bhutalia's initiative to rethink while remembering, while reiterating. I'll start with the images. By 2002, I felt I was ready to embark on my desire to work my way into an engagement with Kashmir, and a set of works on paper followed. I had planned a bigger, much more ambitious project, wanting to refer to various historical and contemporary accounts of Kashmir, to try and put together configurations to rework my diverse and often fairly confused feelings on Kashmir. For various reasons, the work suddenly seemed too big and formidable, and I realized that it would take me some years before I could evolve anything in proportion to the ambitions of my project. I hope you can read the titles of these paintings so that I don't have to repeat them to you. Is it visible? Yeah. Well, then maybe I can do without the titles. So I decided for the time to focus on the poetry of Agha Shahid Ali, the Kashmiri poet who died in US shortly before I started working on the series. The exhibition was titled The Country Without a Post Office, after Shahid's book of poems written in 1991-95. And I allowed myself to be led by the hand, so to speak, to enter the complicated present and past of Kashmir. The series also gave me a chance to develop my art as illustration. Don't tell my father I have died. These are all extracts. The titles of these works are all extracts from Agha Shahid Ali's poems. Your history gets in the way of my memory, from a poem called Farewell. My interest in the poet of Agha Shahid Ali was not confined to his eloquence or to the excitement over his evocation of the visual. More than visual clues, it is Shahid's concern with investing his writing language with the weight and memory of his other languages, Urdu and Kashmiri, with which I have found parallels, to investigate the form and linguistic calibrations of other loved poetic traditions, and in my case, of other visual resources, other loved art histories, has been the project. The task has been to interiorize and hone these other histories into the fabric of my language till their weight transforms into fluency. Papier-mâché inlaid with gold, then ash. I identify with Shahid's desire to translate and invent out of historical stereotype, to devise containers which could transform an urgent anguish and invest it with the memory and resonance contained in traditional forms. His voice devises a plural, repetitive address to layer his passion. As Susan Sontag has said in an argument which could be co-opted in our case, there are cases where repeated exposure to what shocks, saddens, appalls, does not use up a full-hearted response. Habituation is not automatic, for images obey different rules than real life. Representation of the crucifixion does not become banal to believers. Pathos in the form of narrative does not wear out. This is a painting called Pastoral. I presented these works mounted on the Gyanta brocade, taking cues from the Tanka. For alternative, I'm sorry, I don't have a picture of it mounted that way, but you can imagine it. For alternative ways of reading, also to upfront Kashmir's Buddhist past. The Gyanta brocade was and is developed in Banaras in response to Kashmiri and Tibetan patronage. We often think of Kashmir in just the Hindu-Islamic binary and forget that Kashmir, introduced to Buddhism by Ashoka in the 3rd century, became a major hub of Buddhist traffic. After The Country Without a Post Office, other writings on and from Kashmir had started entering my work. The beautiful village of Pachigam still exists. This is a line from out of Shalimar the Clown by Salman Rushdie, which is inspired by this account, which is about the destruction of a Bhand village that invokes planetary turbulence. more so because it is an eloquent self-search of a writer's role in the representation of immense tragedy. Blood on the Road. This is from Shahid's couplet. I must go back briefly to a place I have loved, to tell you those you will efface I have loved. This is another set of works that which I'm going to show you, which is slightly larger works on paper, and which I then, besides the writing of Agha Shahid Ali, had started sourcing other writing. This is an imaginary portrait of Rishi Shavali, a maverick rishi even as rishis go, whose eccentricities did not encourage pupils, so he spent his time with animals and planting trees. Kashmir has a long, as you would know, a long tradition of syncretic rishiism from the 14th century, which combined the long understanding of ascetic philosophy with Islam from Central Asia, introduced to Kashmir by figures like Shah Hamadan. The poetry of unconventional searchers like Lal Ded, Nuruddin Nurani and others is woven into the fabric of Kashmiri society. Testimony. To bring dignity to those whose lives have been ravaged, I have looked to European icon paintings for inspiration. Whereas the woman who tries to ignite the fires of her hearth is sourced from a Safavid Persian prototype. A return. This work returns to the account of the destruction of the village called Pachigam, inhabited by the communities of performers or bhands in Salman Rushdie's Shalimar the Clown, like I just told you. He says, what was that cry? Was it a man, a woman, an angel, or a god who keened us, who howled just so? Could any human voice make such a desolate noise? Moved by images of immense grief in the sculptures of mourning monks at the Mahaparinirvan of Lord Buddha in the tableau at Nara in Japan, I have brought them as witness to the series of inhuman loss of life in Kashmir. Then I go on to a set of works that I've worked on for a very long time, about 10 years, I think, which are started from 2003. And these are worked on a series of Kashmir which tried to take on ways of undoing the fixity of boundaries, using a scale and modes of extension that require other kinds of experiential relationship. These are canvas scrolls in the nature of pitchwise, which are 10 feet high and 6 feet wide. The textual sources I have used not only inform the painted image, but are often inscribed within it or on the reverse. This series is also my tribute to the Kashmiri artisan. They teach me to see no contradiction between precision and proliferation. Enumeration need not be antagonistic to economy, nor the use of stereotype to invention. Now more than ever before, it is crucial to look for ways of to release the understanding of the past from the politics of reduction. Valley is a work inspired by the amazing embroidered map shawl, which lays out the map of Srinagar. There are 4 known map shawls from the mid-19th century, each about 4 by 45 meters wide and high, intended for presentations to various dignitaries. The earliest commission, perhaps in 1819, took the embroiderer Ghulam Muhammad Kulu 37 years to complete. Valley plots out the valley of Kashmir for me, retracing travel routes and coding familiar favorite sites, weaving in and out, using stencils as embroidery wood. The pictorialization of all my large work has been aided substantially by the stencils made by the family of Vishnu Prasad Jadia, the reputed Sanji artists of Mathura who traditionally design and cut paper stencils. I am deeply indebted to their cooperation for making a wide range of their traditional repertoire, and whenever I wanted to intervene, improvising along with me, and more than that, for offering the fluency of their language, their view of the world, to help me structure mine. The use of the Sanji stencils facilitated this desire for visual enumeration. The Sanji has worked for me as structure, surface, motif, proliferation, and as palimpsest. Apart from the poetry and text inscribed on the front of my free-hanging scrolls, I have selected texts extracted from historical accounts, tales, fables, fiction, journalism, and other contemporary histories to stencil on the reverse of each work. As we know, painters of scrolls in Asia engage with words, oral or written, sometimes both. Image and word, written or sung, affect a contingency which does not impinge upon their autonomies, opening up rather than curtailing the dynamics of finding meaning. I don't know if you're able to read any of this, but there's just a detail of the writing at the back of the scroll. Each night, put Kashmir in your dreams. The title of this painting is from Agha Shahid Ali's I See Kashmir from New Delhi at Midnight, and gives the whole series its name. When I started this series, I was certain only about 4 of the banners. But all along, I knew that the logic of the work would demand many more. Working with the idea of opening up interwoven overlapping visualities or ways of seeing necessitated a form that could multiply. The figure in the red background is a reference to the Bhan Pather form of some improvisatory theatre traditions, usually with political overtones, which have been in jeopardy for the last few decades. Gathering threads. This painting is, amongst other things, about a Buddhist past and present, cultural links with Central Asia, trade routes, and the lore around these. Lines from different poems of Agha Shahid Ali were evoking responses from me. Farewell, from a poem of Agha Shahid Ali of the same title. I had never seen a Bhan performance at the time I painted Farewell. So I constructed my own theatric performance, adapting characters from Persian paintings with known Bhan conventions. Characters from the repertoire of the 14th century Turkish painter Siyah Kalam. On the either side, keep a watchful eye. The painting, inscribed with Agha Shahid Ali's Saint-Lumière at Shalimar Gardens, is an attempt to garner histories written and oral. There are references to accounts and legends, including an origin myth, which tells us how the valley of Kashmir was kept submerged in water by a demon Jalodhar, who did not allow any development. After unsuccessful attempts by various male divinities, the goddess Parvati or Sati managed to vanquish him by hurling a mountain at him. I used the motif of the picnic to suggest the resilience, familial and community pleasures in the presence of threat. There are quotes from the life of Shah Zainul Abidin, remembered as the great 15th century king who cared for his people. Sources of painting range from Persian and Central Asian sources, Mughal painting to Italian tempera paintings of Fra Angelico. Dying, dreaming is a quotation. It's part of a paragraph written by Salman Rushdie. I have tried to weave in the lore and folk tales of and from Kashmir into a tapestry along with the contemporary text and images. Interchangeability of text, image, and hashya is what I'm dealing with most in this painting, to reposition the question of what is central and what is the extension, adjunct or aside. This is a rendering of it is a text, it's an extract from Shalimar the Clowns on the kind of condition of the Pandit refugee camps in Jammu. So I've actually had that transcribed across the width of the painting. This is also called the beautiful village of Pachigam, still exists. I tend to do this. I use work that I've done based on a particular verse or a song or an idea, and then I need somehow to rework it and do it in a different way again. While returning to Rushdie's lines on the destruction of the Bhan village of Pachigam, this work also acknowledges my deep admiration and debt to the cave paintings of Tunhuang in Central Asian China. Going away. Sources here range from references to Italian painters like Giotto and Fra Angelico, certain aspects of dance traditions, and a published photograph of a parent of missing sons from Kashmir. Construction site. Here the great 15th century Persian painter Bizad, who was my guiding angel, with his building scenes from the Zafarnama and the Khamsa of Nizami, alternating with the famous scenes of preparing graves for a funeral. But there are other references while the Bhant player tells the story. We must bear. It gets its title from the first phrase of each sentence in Sheikh Nuruddin's Sering verse, quoted on the top left of the painting. This painting owes its initial impetus to images evoked by the brilliant first novel by the Kashmiri author Mirza Waheed, set in a village near the infamous line of control between India and Pakistan, titled The Collaborator. The title of this work, Hunarmand, means possessing extraordinary skill, and the work is about specialized skills of everyday life in Kashmir. I translate from a 19th century manuscript or manual which depicts the profession in Kashmir commissioned by the British rulers following their traditions in other parts of the subcontinent. By drawing on this manuscript, I attempt a salutation to the laboring of the Kashmiri craft workers, attempting to render the pleasure and dignity in their struggle against the circumstances of their survival in the present and past days. Yet, as I translate, the practice of my hand intervenes and something is lost. The energetic gait of the local Kashmiri kalam is perhaps out of the reach of my ambivalent hand. But believing not just in my vanity that this ambivalence may have its merit, I would borrow the words of Aga Shahid Ali about translation, that something can be gained. I bring to the work my own experiences of her working in collaboration with the artists from Srinagar. I also bring together the verse of a 17th century poet, Ghani Kashmiri, on the tribulation of writing quoted within the painting, with a much loved Mughal painting of a scribe in deep concentration, scratching away at his manuscript with his pen. On the reverse of these images of the craftspeople of Kashmir, I have returned to the map shawl, depicting Srinagar or Sheher as it is also known, this time to quote it rather than to code it in my own terms. Below the blue of the skies is a line from an essay titled Captive City by Wasim Bhatt, from an anthology of essays on contemporary Kashmir by Sanjay Kak. And all along flows the Jhelum, the Hydaspes, the Vet, the Vitasta, through its many names, never missing a spire, not a shrine or a temple ghat. It touches everything and blesses everything in space, in history and in spirit. And now the Jhelum is read. This is another installation of the work, the whole series. For the first one was from Bombay, this is from another place. Terrain is an enclosure, vulnerable yet giving succor, sharing stories of loss and yearning that comes from Kashmir and Punjab, from India and Pakistan. This is in a way, my much more recent work. It was done in 2017 and 16 and 17. A girl child abandoned lest, as prophesied, she grows up to find love outside her community, drifts down the river. A father beheads his young daughter, a preemptive act of supposed valor to save her so-called honor when South Asia was partitioned. Carries the memory of her headless body across the border. Homes are left behind, carried across, forsaken, in search of love or acceptance, and remembered in song, dream, or nightmare. This painting is called Border. There are stories of the aftermath of ravagement, of the valor of recovery. A woman crosses a mountain river supported by an earthenware pot to meet her forbidden lover every night. These songs of doomed resistance of Sasi, Soni or Heer are still sung across Punjab and in India and in Pakistan. This is a work I call Sheher. Borders are girded, fortified with barbed wires, fortifications within towns even, where embroiderers practice their age-old craft. Ravens flew in. The list of those who are made to disappear lengthens. Those left behind find recourse in the language of mourning and in resistance. Of exile and departure inspired by a painted drawing by the legendary Pahari painter Nansuk. Inscribed across land and time, these stories seek to lend each other new cumulative language and contexts. Thank you. I think we could have the lights on now. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
How to the Kashmir is wise reason of disrupt the community violence.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
The Kashmir. What is motive of the crisis of the
Well, that's a very, very long story, and I don't think I'm the right one.
No. Yeah, that's 1919. The Pandit also removed the Kashmir.
These are issues that I'm not best equipped to answer. I mean, you would need political scientists or a historian to be answering this, or even not to be answering it, but to opening up the questions.
As you evolve as an artist, I've been studying your works, and do you feel the inclusion of word and image together a powerful way of rendition in your growth as an artist?
You know, when I started this series of Each Night Put Kashmir in Your Dreams, at that time, I mean, I had used text earlier in a small way, but when I was doing this particular series, I felt that, I mean, I was reading quite a lot because for me to try and understand things, I had needed to read. I felt the need to acknowledge the kind of understanding I had of what I was doing or what I was attempting to do within my work. Not just to have it as a list of acknowledgements on some board, within the work. And so for that, I definitely felt very much that I needed a quantum of text, my kind of bibliography to be out there and, you know, to be available and to add, to hopefully to extend the work. But it's not necessarily that I would put text into every work that I do.
I find in this series of works, I find that there is a very, though it's so rich in so many influences, I do find your own touch in, it looks more like a tapestry with coming forward and going back, which gives it also a linear dimension, and it feels I'm going into the painting, as Bryce Martin would say, with his plain blue painting. I feel I'm going into byways and lanes, and it was very captivating. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah. I just want to know the process of your work actually, because also the titles that you give, how do you arrive at the titles, and basically how much time you spend and what is the process of working in each of your work?
You know, if you get me started on processes, I'll go on for an hour. But anyway, to cut a long story short, the title sometimes comes in right from the beginning, sometimes it comes in halfway through, sometimes it comes at the end, you know, and that's fluid. But for me, the process of working is an additive one. I don't do a conceptualization in advance and make a detailed sketch of what I'm going to do. I have some ideas of what I want to put in the work. And then I go along improvising and adding as I'm working. And so, so in that sense also, there is a kind of play of what I'm drawing and what I'm painting. You know, it's not that I draw everything first and then fill it up and it's painted. But these things, the painting develops with this overlapping process of drawing and painting. Does that answer your question? Or something more about the technique of the work?
Yeah. Also, in terms of the time taken generally as an average, if you can talk any one painting maybe.
Well, that varies very much. These large works took about 6 months or so for each work to be done, but sometimes, I mean, it's on the size of the work and the amount of detail I do, or the amount of, sometimes I'm stuck for something and I need to keep reworking it, so that's how, but it's not that I plan everything in advance. It just, there are certain ideas I might have, certain ideas of what I want to do, and maybe even some motives, or maybe even some sensory feelings that I want to put in. I feel like a truant art student a bit when I say admitting this, because we were always told that we have to first make detailed studies of what we're going to paint, and that's somewhere sticking in my head still.
Nilima, I don't know when you'll have the time to, but you know, in the middle you said that you worked with artisans in Kashmir. I think you said something like that. Could we know a little bit about, you know, what was the work, or just the nature of dialogue between you and various people that you met in Kashmir, or, you know, the handicraft, whatever you came across when you were searching for your vision of your paintings?
You know, I got this opportunity given by Rajiv Sethi when he was doing up the new Bombay Terminal 2 airport with works of art. I had a long-standing desire to work with people who practice other kinds of crafts, not just with my own hand. And I was lucky because Rajiv was the best person to introduce me to some of these artists who were from Srinagar. I knew that I wanted to work with craftspeople from Srinagar, but so I was introduced to Fayaz Ahmad Jan, and he was a fairly young but known as a master craftsman who was extremely friendly and very, very, I mean, he believed in our collaboration. So then the process started. He also introduced me to a lot more. I mean, it was a wonderful year of going around and looking at the studios and ateliers of different kinds of people who practice different kinds of arts. But then we had to make a decision about what we wanted to use in the airport, and the main criteria became the permanency, the hardness. We chose either the woodwork or the ceramic, because that would work in an airport rather than the textile or something else. And so this process of working with them, especially with Fayaz, I mean, perhaps to a lesser degree to others, truly became a collaborative one, because then we would never tell each other what to do, but we would suggest and share images and say कि हाँ शायद ये कुछ ऐसा बना है तो उसके साथ मिल सकता है, जुड़ सकता है, things like that. And we shared images, source materials that I use, I shared with them. But what was so wonderful for me, I mean, it was really a learning experience, was that here's this craftsperson who does little boxes of this size and has worked on that for many years. And you give him a 4x8 board to do, and 4x8x4, which means a mural of about 8 by 12, whatever, you know. So that visual intelligence of the artist then really comes into play. You know, how to translate from this idiom which has been worked on a very small scale. So that was exciting and it was gratifying. And so in each one there would be some change. And in the last set of works that they did for this particular mural that we did was really, he said, I said, आप कुछ आजकल का बनाओगे? तो he said, हाँ, शहर बना दूंगा. And that's what he did. I mean, he actually made the city, I'm sorry I don't have images of these, but he made the city of Srinagar to the west of his part of Srinagar more than other parts, but it was a wonderful experience. Yeah. Is there any other? No. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's the end of today. We look forward to welcoming you back tomorrow for the third day of the Hindu Lit for Life 2019. At this point, I'd like to thank our sponsors in association with NewsX, associate sponsors VR Chennai, fresh food partner ID Foods, session sponsor United India Insurance, bookstore partner Higginbotham's, water partner Archie Water, radio partner Fever FM, Wi-Fi partner ACT, brought to you by Theme. Last announcement for today, Swaratma will be playing outside, so if you'd like to hear some good music, please head on out and have a good night. Thank you.